Hello and welcome. My name is Sarah Carmone, and I am the Executive Director of the Harvard Alumni Association. It's wonderful to have so many of you with us today, including hundreds of college alumni, as well as members of the Crimson Society, those who have already celebrated their 50th reunion. Thank you so much for joining us. A few quick housekeeping notes before we begin. Today's program is an off-the-record opportunity solely for Harvard alumni. We are using Zoom webinar, so your camera and audio will remain muted during today's event. If you have a question for Dean Gay, please enter it into the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. I'll now introduce our speakers so we can get right to the conversation. First, I'm delighted to welcome our moderator today, David Laibson, from the great Harvard College class of 1988. David is currently the Robert I. Goldman Professor of Economics and Faculty Dean of Lowell House. He currently teaches Ec 10, the college's longest running and most popular course. Alongside a storied career on the faculty, David leads Harvard's Foundations of Human Behavior initiative and serves on an impressive number of boards and professional associations. We are lucky to have him joining us today. And now our featured guest, Claudine Gay, who received her PhD from Harvard in 1998, is currently the Edgerley Family Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences and Professor of Government and of African and African American Studies. And on December 15th, 2022, she was named as Harvard's 30th president, a role she will assume on July 1st. As Penny Pritzker, Harvard's senior fellow, said upon Claudine's appointment as president, Claudine is a remarkable leader who is profoundly devoted to sustaining and enhancing Harvard's academic excellence, to championing both the value and the values of higher education and research, to expanding opportunity and to strengthening Harvard as a font of ideas and a force for good in the world. Claudine, we are thrilled to have you with us today and look forward to supporting you as you assume the presidency this summer. Claudine and David, I'm delighted to welcome you both to the virtual stage. Thank you for your time and your deep commitment to the alumni community. David, over to you.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. It's a wonderful privilege to spend the next 50 minutes with you. I'm so excited to have a conversation with Dean Gay, who I deeply admire, who has been a spectacular leader of our community, who has emphasized so many values that we hold dear: our research, our teaching, our service, our community building. It's been a privilege to work with Dean Gay, and I'm excited for the conversation to come. So let me begin by maybe reminding everyone.
So nice, David. Thank you. What a nice introduction.
My pleasure. Let me begin by reminding everyone a bit about Dean Gay's trajectory. And of course, everyone here on this call knows that Dean Gay has been the Dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences and will soon be the president of our university. We're all excited about that. But there's an important history that I want to kind of look into and help all of us understand and have Dean Gay explain. So Dean Gay was a student here and has a lot of deep connections to our community, a doctoral student, a faculty member in the Department of Government, a professor in the Department of African and African American Studies, a divisional dean in social science, the dean of the Faculty of Arts and Sciences. So Dean Gay, can you tell us a bit about what brought you to Harvard in the first place and what kept bringing you back? There was a bit of a back and forth with Stanford where you started there, you came here.
I'm home now. I'm home now.
Sorry?
I'm home now. So
I'm super excited to hear that. So what kept bringing you back to Harvard? What is exciting here that made returning to Harvard appealing and making a permanent home here the right choice for you?
Thank you. And thank you again for facilitating this conversation. It's great to see you. Yes, I have a long Harvard story, and it's included time away from Harvard, but never with Harvard very far from my heart and my mind. My Harvard story began 30 years ago Yikes. When I arrived at Litower as a PhD student in the government department, and I arrived very eager to prove to my immigrant parents that there was a whole world of careers out there beyond law, medicine, and engineering. And I immediately fell in love with this place, with just the vitality of the university, the passion for learning, the obvious institutional commitment to excellence and to leadership, and also just the sheer scale of this place, because I think that's something that people feel the moment that they arrive here, whether as a student or as a faculty member. And those are all the things that sustained and inspired me when I was a graduate student here. And ultimately, it's what led me back to Harvard as a faculty member when I came back in 2006. And it's also why I was so humbled by President Backhow's invitation to lead the FAS in 2018, and then more recently to be elected to serve as the 30th president. This is an extraordinary place. It's unlike any other, not just in American higher ed, but in all of higher ed. With the talent, the diversity, the ambition that exists here, and really just across all of our schools, our ability to do really great things is unmatched. And I see it as a place of just enormous possibility. And that's why it's always been an honor to be a member of this community in all of my various roles. And it's hard to imagine anything more rewarding than now being able to lead it and help shape its future as president.
So your faculty and your student community is enormously excited about the beginning of your presidency. As you contemplate this next critical step in your trajectory, what is exciting you as you begin the process of becoming president?
Wow. So since January, I've really been diving into this whole transition period in earnest, and really using the last few months to begin to expand my network beyond the FAS. And that's meant, a lot of conversations with colleagues in parts of Harvard that were less familiar to me. And by virtue of, living in a particular part of the university. And it's been a chance to learn more about the hopes and the aspirations that are really exist across our many schools. And I have to say that my excitement for what's ahead has only grown. I've always known Harvard to be an ambitious place, but these conversations have really only magnified that for me. And now Harvard is obviously a big place, so there's no way I'll be able to learn or hear everything I need to know before July 1st. But and I think about my whole first year really as a time for learning and discovery. But again, already what I've heard makes me feel tremendously both inspired and confident and restless for the future, and all the ways that we can, as I said at the time of my announcement, find more ways of really connecting Harvard to the rest of the world.
Wonderful. So getting back to the personal, I want to go back to the beginning of your time here and link this to some of the memories that many of the alumni here today have. We all experienced the campus in our own idiosyncratic ways and found our special places to hide out and study. I can picture the particular spots in the stacks where I snuck in maybe a Snickers bar and stayed there for 5 hours. And don't tell anyone that I stuck a Snickers bar into the stacks, and did my thing when I was back here as a student in the 1980s. What are the special places on campus for you as a doctoral student, as a faculty member, maybe even as a dean, though I guess you can't sneak around anymore.
Yeah.
You're a familiar face.
Yeah. There's definitely no sneaking around anymore. But so when I was here as a graduate student, other than, my tiny little studio apartment on Irving Street, I spent a lot of time in Litower Library. It was quiet, it was sunny, and kind of most important for me, it had really great sight lines into the lobby, which was ideal for people watching. And now, I don't venture over to Littauer, but I spent a lot of time sitting on the back steps of University Hall overlooking Tercentenary Theater, because it's also a great spot for people watching. So a theme here is that I like distraction. And I'm looking forward to seeing what the views from Mass Hall have to offer. Though, as you anticipated, it'll probably be a lot harder to do that discreetly. But those have always been some of my favorite spots.
So turning back again to earlier days, you have been an extraordinarily productive scholar and have done important work, which I'm imagining is crowded out by many of your leadership roles. But I think it would be useful for the alumni to hear about the critical scholarship that you're doing now and form the beginning of your career as a professor of government, as a quantitative social scientist. So maybe you could tell us a bit about that work.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation to connect and tap that side of my brain. So as you mentioned, I trained as a political scientist, earned my PhD in the government department. And in my work, I'm very interested in the political lives and choices of ordinary people. So, and in my work, I've tended over the course of my career to focus on trying to understand why there is stratification in political activity, like voter turnout, for example. Why is it that certain groups, whether it's low-income adults or people of color, who have so much at stake in politics and public affairs, nonetheless participate so little, certainly in some forms of political activity? And then what can be done to change that, either by lowering the costs of participation and making it easier to participate, or increasing the perceived benefits, and doing that through policy making that is more responsive to local needs and that can inspire greater engagement, or policy makers who are demographically more representative of their constituents, and that fact can have the effect of inspiring more engagement in politics and political life. So, a central premise that has animated all of my work and the questions that I've been asking is the idea that democracy is better, is stronger, the more people participate. So really understanding how to activate the population and the citizenry is something that I've always been concerned with in my work.
So pragmatically, what would you recommend we could do as a society to increase?
Lower the costs. I mean, I talk about this a lot with my students, but we are in many ways without peer relative to other advanced industrial democracies in all the barriers that we put up to participation, particularly to voting. I mean, even things as simple as the fact that we hold elections on a weekday, the fact that it's individuals have to register to vote instead of that being automatic, and each time you change your address, you have to re-register to vote. The fact that we, in many instances, require people to register many, many weeks and sometimes months before an election, often before they're even thinking about the election. So all those ways are, all those practices that we have are ones that, again, raise the cost of participation. So there are, lots of little things that hacks that we could pursue to lower those costs and have the effect being greater participation among more people.
Yeah, those are excellent proposals. So I loved that you started that answer by saying you talked about these issues with your students. And one of the many lessons that I've learned from you in our years of interaction is the priority that you place on our students, on our role as teachers. Yeah. And I think a place like Harvard, where There's so much outstanding scholarship. It's sometimes easy to forget that one of our absolutely primary roles is the role as teacher. And I'm really admiring the way you've emphasized that and helped the faculty prioritize that particular aspect of our days. I know you're not teaching right now, so I imagine that you greatly miss the opportunity to be in the classroom, but perhaps you could tell us a bit about the courses that you've taught in the past and the energy and excitement and stimulus that you took from those interactions.
Yeah, happy to. So, I mean, picking up on the last thread, one of my favorite classes to teach was a course on democratic citizenship. It was an undergraduate class, a lecture course. And what I always found so rewarding about teaching that is, many of the students who were in the classroom have been raised in democratic societies, whether here or abroad, but haven't necessarily ever reflected on how it works in practice, what democracy means at the ground level. And what's really fun about the class is that it becomes this space where they can examine some of their own assumptions about what democracy requires, what democratic participation should look like and what it requires, what it means to be an informed citizen, and really come to understand how ordinary people, even without detailed policy knowledge, in some cases, even without a sort of textbook understanding of how our political system works, can nonetheless make political choices that are consistent with their values and beliefs. And in that way, can and should be trusted in their exercise of democratic power. So the class inevitably leads students to think about their own relationship to politics. And again, some of the assumptions that they bring to who should and shouldn't be allowed to engage in democratic participation. So that's one of the classes that I've taught in the past that I've always found particularly satisfying.
Yeah. What's the style in your classroom? I'd love to take your class. You give a lecture? Is it conversational?
Yeah,
Is it how do you approach it?
Yeah, I try to bring both together. So there's always a lot of ground that I want to cover in any individual class, usually too much. I mean, it's one of the things that, even this many decades into my career, just figuring out how much you can do in a 1 hour lecture is there's definitely an art to that I haven't fully mastered. But so there's always some significant lecture piece, but at multiple moments during the lecture, there's always the kind of pause, time out, and opportunity to engage directly in some back and forth with the students. And then obviously, because it's a lecture, they then also are supported through discussion sections that they have with their teaching fellows. But even in the context of our time together in the classroom as a group, I try to get a little bit of back and forth, which is helpful also for, figuring out what concepts are landing versus not, and how I might want to, tweak or evolve the class in the future.
Yeah. Another hallmark of your leadership is the way you welcome diverse voices and make everyone feel at home in a conversation and welcomed to engage. How does that propagate into your classroom?
Yeah, so one of the things that I just remember very distinctly from when I was a student is I always found it really hard to speak up in class. And the classes that I ended up enjoying the most and the faculty I ended up building strongest relationships with were ones that were really intentional and proactive about drawing everyone into the conversation, even if it meant doing things that felt kind of artificial, whether it's, staging a debate or literally like use, and actually something that I did periodically is use a random number generator, and everyone has a different number, and it's just, okay, 7, join the conversation. Because those are things that I responded really positively to when I was a student. Those are the kinds of things that I've always brought into my class and my classes is, recognizing that every student has so much to bring to the conversation, and how they want to engage is going to vary for any number of reasons, but each of them is capable of joining the conversation and elevating the discourse, so that it's my responsibility to figure out how to draw that out. And so, yeah, so again, remembering my own time in the classroom, I do things like stage debates, I use random number generators. And then sometimes I just make the point of students that I sense are having, difficulty figuring out how to intervene. I always try to engage with them outside the classroom in office hours, and sometimes preview a discussion that's going to happen, say in the following week, so that when we get to that discussion, I can say, Melissa, when we were talking in office hours, you made X, Y, and Z point. Do you want to say more about that? And that can sometimes be effective in drawing people into a conversation in a setting where they might otherwise, not feel totally comfortable.
I love those strategies for bringing everyone into the conversation. I think it's so important. It's so easy for a classroom to end up getting dominated by voices.
Yeah,
I think
because our students are brilliant.
Seminar to the faculty.
Exactly, our students are brilliant. They have a ton of things to say, especially when it comes to politics. So yeah, it does require just some real intentionality and being able to spot dynamics in the classroom.
So another way that you're miraculously engaged with our students is, I know you've been a first-year advisor.
Yes.
Are you still doing that?
Yes, I am. And I'm going to continue doing that. I just filled out my first.
Maybe you should explain what a first-year advisor is, so everyone understands. I'm not sure it existed when we were here.
Yeah. So every first-year student is paired with an advisor, and it could be a faculty member, or it could be a member of the senior administrative staff, any number of kind of adults on campus that is a point person as the student is making their transition from high school to college. And it's one member of what is really an advising team. So this complements their peer advisor, this complements their proctor, this complements the resident dean for their yard. It's just a whole network of individuals that are working to support the student. But serving as a first-year advisor is incredibly rewarding. So yes, I've done it for a number of years. I continue to do it. I always have at least one student, sometimes two or three. And it's frankly, it's how I try to compensate for all that I miss by not being in the classroom right now. And I value the direct, unmediated view on the student experience. Now, one of the things, having advised so many first years and witnessing their journeys through Harvard, I can say with confidence, and this is what I relay to all of my first year advisees, that there are many different Harvard experiences out there, which I always hope will be a relief to students who arrive here convinced that there's only one right way to do Harvard. And also, serving as a first-year advisor has, for me, been just a very powerful reminder of something that can be easy to forget. And that is that, for some students, the hopes and dreams and aspirations of many, many family members and sometimes entire communities all converge on this one degree. And you have to take that seriously and approach your advising relationship with sensitivity and respect, and without the goal of defining for the student what their path through Harvard should look like. Or what particular concentration you think is best for them, or what co-curricular activities they should pursue, although I have views on that, or how they should spend their summers. And, don't bring your own agenda, because they are already burdened by so many others. And truly, meeting students where they are and figuring out how you can enable an authentic journey for them. And when you're able to do that, it's really satisfying. And it's one of the reasons why, no matter how busy my schedule gets, I'm always going to make time to continue to serve in that role.
Yeah, I think that's so important. I feel very strongly that the classroom interaction is one modality, but these one-on-one interactions, which a university like Harvard can almost uniquely provide.
Which so well as a faculty dean. So it's very unique, very unique.
Yeah, and many students really need that very intimate conversation in order to communicate things that they're struggling with. And there's no other format that's really organic for that. Maybe an office hour with a faculty member that you're very close to, but that first year advisor and the advisors that you'll encounter throughout the rest of your time play this absolutely critical role. Yeah.
And that's one of the reasons why my first year advisees don't get rid of me after 1 year. I continue to meet with them, while they're here for their whole 4 years. And because it is, such an honor and privilege to be able to join them on their journey, but also just recognizing that, I think the more supports that we can provide for our incredibly high achieving students, the better.
Yeah. They must also share their frustrations with the university with you. What do they tell you that they would like to see changed?
Oh, well, yes, they do. And actually, I always find that helpful too. So one of the ones that I will share is they talk about, this is the first years, they talk about how hard it is to find social spaces where they can all come together. And I remember talking to one of my first years right after the Smith Campus Center opened, and I was like, what about the Smith Campus Center? There's like all this space that's set aside for students, and isn't that a great place to hang out? And they were saying, oh, it's already too quiet. It's like, okay. It turns out also, a lot of the dorms have relatively small common rooms. And so finding like really good convening, honestly, party spaces, social spaces that are just first year oriented. That's one of the things that the students have, my advisees have talked to me about. And it's through those conversations that identifying a way to create that space has sort of made its way up my, agenda, the FAS agenda of priorities. It's like, we actually need to do something about creating a first year space.
Yeah. Do they find those spaces as sophomores, juniors, and seniors in the houses?
They do. Because of the work that you all do. Yeah, they find it in the houses. So this is really, it's really about socializing, connecting as a class in the first year and creating spaces that enable and facilitate that. Because certainly once they go into the houses, they have those spaces.
Yeah. What other advice do you find yourself often giving? You've said there is no single path, so there is no single piece of advice, but what are the more familiar
on co-curriculars? So that's the thing, is that, I try not to impose rules on them, but, I talk about the virtues of maybe having no more than 3 co-curricular commitments in your first year. And I have thoughts about, like, maybe there's one that is kind of somehow tied to what you're thinking about long-term for your life, your professional ambitions. One that's just fun and joyful, and it like connects you to a community that you feel, that you want to be connected to. And I was like, and then it'd be great if you had one where you actually used your body, because I do think students become very alienated from their bodies here. So something that's a little bit more physical. But again, I don't impose that. I just throw that out there. But the main thing I say is 3 is good, because a lot of our students come in and, they were like the president or founder of like 10 different clubs and nonprofits and organizations. And in addition to doing a full high school course load, and they come into college with the intention of replicating that. And so getting them to slow down, to value free time, and to value sleep, and also to devote their attention to the academics. That's one of the pieces of advice that I routinely give. The other one is to go to office hours. And so I do a lot of, not only do I do a lot of, offering of that advice, but I also coach students about how to use office hours, how to approach office hours. And because that is something that some students anyways, need to learn how to do. I think they come in sometimes with the assumption that they don't want to be a bother to the faculty. And it's like, no, please bother us. That's why we're here. Like we've chosen not to be at think tanks or institutes for advanced study because we actually want to be interacting with students. And no, you don't have to have an agenda. Sometimes you can just go to office hours because you're enjoying the class and you want to be able to convey that you're enjoying the class and you want to get to know the professor. And it's okay to go for just that reason. So not overdoing it on co-curriculars and going to office hours. Those are like the two big pieces of advice that I give to all my students.
Fantastic advice. I wish all of the students could be your first year advisor. we should get that advice in some format that can scale up. A lot of students that I see later end up having too many commitments. It undermines the quality of their experience.
It does. Yeah.
So now switching from the most personal, these one-on-one interactions, to university level initiatives. Another hallmark of your leadership has been emphasizing the service that this university does to the whole wide world.
Yeah.
So we're not just here in our ivory tower. We're also not just here as teachers for this community, but we're creating insights, breakthroughs, contributions to the global community.
Yeah.
Now, one of the areas that has been absolutely critical is with respect to climate science and climate change.
Yeah.
There's many others. Would you kind of, I think your emphasis on our obligations to serve the global community are so important and things that we've taken to heart. Tell us a bit about some of those initiatives.
Yeah. So thank you for inviting me to share on that. Certainly when I imagine Harvard in the years ahead, Harvard at 400, which is just around the corner, I see a university that is more connected to the world through our scholarship and the questions that we decide to foreground and build a collective agenda around, through our educational programs, both, how we're teaching our students who are in our classroom, but also how we're reaching folks who cannot sit in our classroom, and also just through our public engagement. And I think all of that is how we end up extending our extraordinary teaching and research mission and assets to have an impact on issues that matter, obviously not just to us here on campus, but well beyond our gates. And I'm glad that you mentioned climate, because there is perhaps no greater existential threat than the climate crisis. And it's a space where I'm very committed to really harnessing the power of our whole intellectual community to advance our understanding and some of the solutions that we can bring to the table when it comes to climate and sustainability. This conversation today is actually incredibly well timed, because our convening power was something that was very much on display just earlier this week at the inaugural Harvard Climate Symposium led by the Salata Institute. And that was just incredible. It brought together leaders across academia and business and government and civil society to discuss some of the most difficult questions raised by climate change and our strategies to combat it, to mitigate it, to cope with it. And that, again, sitting in Klarman Hall, filled to capacity, 1,000 people, and everyone trying to figure out how we as a broad community, where Harvard is a central player, can actually be making progress together on these issues. In terms of some other, specific examples, I'll just speak here from the vantage point of the FAS, where obviously my focus has been for the last few years, but in parallel with efforts happening at the university level, we in the FAS have been working to advance an approach to climate and sustainability that really puts students in the center of a truly multidisciplinary conversation. So as you know, we have this climate cluster search that's underway, and the goal there is to grow the number of faculty in the FAS whose teaching and research are primarily focused on the environment, climate, sustainability. And we're hoping to be able to make, at least 3 exciting senior appointments over the next year. We've also been working to invite our existing faculty to the table and trying to find ways for those who, are not climate experts, but who want to bring issues of climate into their teaching and research, helping them find the supports and access to colleagues that they need to be connected to make that possible. And then, we've also been partnering with the Salata Institute to try to build a professional development network in climate and sustainability that brings together our alums and job opportunities and internships for FAS students as, and usually really thinking about this as a pilot for a university-wide program. But again, beginning with the needs and ambitions of the students here in the college and in the graduate school. So, I mean, I think that the FAS, by virtue of its breadth, and as the home for undergraduate education, that can play a very unique role in these broader climate efforts. And all of this is a model for how we as an institution can be more connected to the world and the work that we do.
I've really appreciated your highlighting that part of our role. Telling the faculty that this is important, and it really does matter. Not just the arcane research we do, but also the downstream impact that we can have. And also, as you point out, through our impact in teaching students who will then go out and also play these important roles.
Absolutely.
So now let's talk a bit about your broader achievements as the Dean of the FAS. I mean, there's this very exciting opportunity coming on July 1. You've done so many important things as our leader since, I guess,
2018.
2018, yeah. And of course, we are deeply grateful to you for your leadership during the pandemic. You've been an extraordinarily brilliant and wise leader, taking us through perhaps one of the greatest crises the university has faced. Thank you for helping us, leading us through this crisis. As you look back on your time as the leader of the FAS, what do you think of as the key achievements of your administration? And I think, the pandemic leadership is something that we'd all like to hear about as well.
I'm so happy to put that. I'm happy to have that recede from my memory as I reflect back on the last few years, try to block out the decade, what felt like the decade of the pandemic. But really, since the beginning of my deanship, when I've had the opportunity to talk with the community, the broader Harvard community beyond our campus, I've described my vision of building an academic community of unbounded intellectual ambition, and one that truly mobilizes just our profound disciplinary strength to engage with the world's most urgent problems. And I'm really proud of the progress that we've made toward that vision by, investing in talent and innovation and in discovery, and also all the while just making sure that we maintain a very strong academic core. And so some of the progress that against those goals that I am really proud to be able to point to is, beginning with our faculty. I think we can first look there, and we've been able to maintain really strong faculty hiring, as well as retain our leading scholars in an intensely competitive academic market, which well, coming from economics. And we've been able to do that even through the headwinds of the pandemic. I was sharing with the faculty at our recent and last FAS-wide faculty meeting that, just over the last 4 years, 12% of our current ladder faculty have been hired just in that time period. And while, every hire or retention is a victory, there are some that changed the trajectory of the institution. And so here, I would point to the 3 senior recruitments through the cluster hire in ethnicity, indigeneity, migration, field defining scholars that are expanding our academic footprint in that area. And we're now harnessing the power of that approach in the climate cluster search, which I'm hoping will move us forward in terms of accelerating the work that we're doing around climate and sustainability. We've also invested in talent through our students, and in particular through some pretty significant enhancements in our undergraduate financial aid program that have made our institution even more accessible and more competitive for, recruiting the world's most talented young people. We eliminated the summer earnings requirement as part of our financial aid packages. We've raised the bright line to $85,000, below which families do not contribute at all to the cost of their students' Harvard education. And those feel not only significant and meaningful, but also just really rewarding, personally rewarding, that we've been able to make steps like that. We've also, realized that, bringing extraordinarily talented people to Harvard isn't enough. We also actually have to put resources behind their most ambitious ideas. And we've been working to do that through investments in a whole variety of academic initiatives and educational programs, like the Harvard Quantum Initiative, I think is a great example, where we've been, we've put together state-of-the-art facilities, graduate training, and more robust research funding, and really putting it behind an impressive leading edge community of quantum scientists. And all of this has been achieved while also ensuring that the FAS as a whole is on a firm foundation, because, at the end of the day, the charge is not just to sustain the vitality of our teaching and research mission today, but also for the long haul. And that's an area where, it feels really good to know that my successor will step into their role confident that the FAS is financially healthy and strong and prepared for some of the opportunities and challenges ahead. So there's a lot that I'm proud of. And I honestly couldn't be more pleased as I look back on the work of the last few years.
For the alumni, I do want to highlight the financial pivot of getting the university onto a sustainable track is an enormous achievement that's often easy to miss because it involves difficult trade-offs.
Yeah.
And we're grateful to you. Here I'm speaking as an alumnus for assuring the next century of our health and progress.
Thank you.
Moving ahead. You've also been a huge advocate for our role as teachers in thinking about who we hire and how we prioritize resources. And I think that role as FAS Dean has also been central. You want to speak to that question?
Yeah, absolutely. I think of this in the context of, bringing extraordinary people here, but then also doing the work to make sure that they succeed. And part of succeeding is being able to contribute at a high level, not only in their research, but also in their citizenship and certainly in their teaching and providing them support for that. So as you know, as someone who has led a department and has been an active faculty mentor himself, we put a lot of emphasis on teaching here in the FAS. It is a priority consideration when we are recruiting faculty here. It's also an area where we provide a lot of support to early career scholars as they develop to become more effective in the classroom. Supports that sometimes come from departments, but also can come from things like the Bach Center. And then we look critically at our faculty's effectiveness in the classroom and outside of the classroom with students when we're considering promotion, both promotion at the level from assistant to associate professor, which is still untenured, and certainly when we're considering tenure and a lifetime appointment at Harvard. Our expectation is for excellence across all domains: research, citizenship, and teaching. And I'm incredibly pleased and proud to be able to say that the vast majority of our colleagues are not only on board, but are models for what it is that we want from a Harvard faculty member. And again, I think the commitment among those who are faculty leaders and certainly in academic leadership for the school is to continue to evolve to a place where that is the expectation when folks arrive here, and then that's the kind of support they get while they're here.
Thank you. So cutting back to the personal, we're close to the end. Tell us a bit about what you're doing for fun these days. What are you reading? What are you watching?
Other than
you get any time to go out and smell the roses? What
exactly when I'm not doing a job and a half? I read a lot. I especially novels. I probably read 2 or 3 novels a month. It's how I unwind. And I'm reading a new one right now by Mona Simpson, Commitment, which I highly recommend. I'm only about a third of the way into it, but it's fabulous. It's this coming of age story that is played out in a very particular family context where the mother suffers from mental illness. It's really fabulous. So I highly recommend that. But then I also do my fair, some streaming, and I'm watching Succession, of course, but I'm 2 episodes behind. So please no spoilers. But yeah, between reading a lot of novels and, gripping television, that's how I unwind.
Fantastic. So we're almost out of time. One last question. As you have 1,000 alumni with you today, what can we do? And here I'll put myself in the alumni category. What can we do to support you and to support the students in our community? What suggestions do you have for us?
Oh my goodness. Thank you. Thank you for asking. Many of the important investments and achievements that I was describing earlier were made possible by our alums and, by generous philanthropic support among our alums. The progress we've made on undergraduate financial aid and student support, the investments in quantum and Asian American studies, in climate, and moving forward there, all of that has been bolstered by the generosity of Harvard alums and friends. That is what ensures that the Harvard experience and Harvard's leadership endures and thrives today for this generation, but also for many to come. And, as looking ahead to the future, we are in a moment of remarkable and accelerating change. But that also means we're in a moment of possibility. There are so many new frontiers where there are opportunities for leadership for us. And as I think about my role as president, it's about bringing the power of all those ideas and supporting the people who pursue them. And in that work, there's no question that our most valuable asset is this enormous community. And that includes all of you, our alums. Your partnership is so valuable, having you in our corner, cheering us on, demanding that we be ambitious, demanding that we seize opportunities for innovation and for leadership. All that is incredibly important. So my hope is that you'll continue to stay involved, whether that's through your reunion class, your house, your athletic team, your academic department. We need your ambition, your voices, your ideas. And that's how we build the strong Harvard that the world needs. And so that's what when I'm asked how you can be helpful, stay engaged.
Well, Dean Gay, let me extend the thanks from my own thanks and the thanks from the thousands and thousands of alumni and students and faculty that have relied on you to lead our community so brilliantly in the years past, and we confidently anticipate a wonderful presidency. We wish you the best of luck, which we're confident you won't need.
Thank you.
We have every confidence that the future is going to be brilliant under your leadership. Thanks to you, and thanks to all the alumni who joined us today. I look forward to seeing many of you at alumni events here on campus. 88, a special call out to that class. I look forward to celebrating with all of you here, indeed in Lowell House, which I am now the faculty dean of. So congratulations to all the alumni and welcome back to your special events, your reunions. And with that, I think we're going to call this webinar to a close.
Wonderful. Thank you, David.